I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. A bipartisan group of senators led by Susan Collins and Joe Manchin unveiled legislation Wednesday to overhaul, quote, archaic and ambiguous election laws. This comes after former President Trump's legal team attempted to exploit unclear language in an 1887 law to keep him in power after the 2020 election. The Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act clarifies that the role of the vice president in certifying election results is, quote, solely ministerial, with no authority to, quote, solely determine, accept, reject, or otherwise adjudicate the outcome. The second bill, called the Enhanced Election Security and Protection Act, doubles the potential jail time for intimidating election officials, voters, or candidates from 1 to 2 years. Manchin called these, quote, common sense reforms that would help restore Americans' faith in our democracy. Here's more from the West Virginia Democrat.
Mr. President, I rise today to acknowledge the months of bipartisan hard work that has gone into two bills that we're filing today. The Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act. I repeat, the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act, and the Enhanced Election Security and Protection Act. I'd like to commend my dear friend, Senator Susan Collins, for her leadership throughout this process. She has been shepherding this through and working diligently as only she can do, and does it so well. We started these discussions back in January when partisanship around here was at a fever pitch. The toxic environment was absolutely not conducive to things that need to be done. But for those that may not remember, we were in the middle of the heated debate over voting rights, with both sides, Democrat and Republicans, were equally dug in their positions, and it was kind of hard to move people off of that. The insurrection January the 6th, in a situation that's been going on since 1887, it should have been corrected, and it had not been. But no one ever felt that we would have what we had, so now we have to take care of it. And everyone stepped to the plate. By January the 19th, my Democratic colleagues were so frustrated that they forced a vote on repealing the filibuster to allow that bill to pass with a simple majority along party lines. It appeared to many, both inside and outside of Washington, D.C., that the Senate was fundamentally broken. But Senator Collins and I have worked together for a long time, and we never gave up. We were not convinced it was broken. And you just have to work a little bit harder. They call us the most deliberate body. Well, to deliberate means to talk, to converse. And when that fails, then basically the deliberate body is no longer the deliberate body, and we were not going to let that happen to us. We asked our colleagues and friends to come together to start trying to see if we could work together and find a pathway and find common ground. Well, guess what they did? So I'm here to thank those who sat down. Senator Portman, Rob Portman, we had Senator Murphy, we had Senator Romney, Senator Shaheen, Senator Murkowski, Senator Warner, Senator Tillis, Senator Sinema, Senator Capito, Senator Cardin, Senator Young, Senator Coons, Senator Sass, and Senator Graham. Now that was truly a team effort when you think about it. And this has gone on for quite some time. What we learned through those discussions is that there was bipartisan support for some important common sense reforms that would help restore Americans' faith in our democracy and how we basically apply our democracy, how do we select our representative form of government. Specifically, most of our group felt that we could and that we should reform the Electoral Count Act to remove the ambiguity that we saw weaponized after the last election. We were all in agreement. Enhance the protections for local election officials that were facing unprecedented threats and intimidations. These are people who volunteer most basically. And it's basically family handing down generation after generation. People who always believe that their civic duty is to be able to perform during the election times. We wanted to establish the best practice for the U.S. Postal Service to improve the handling of mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots has been so convenient to a lot of older people, shut-ins, and in a situation where we had this pandemic, my goodness, it was the only way that people could vote. So reauthorize the Election Assistance Commission to help states improve the administration and the security of federal elections. The most important thing that we can do is that when that vote is cast and that vote is counted accurately, it has to be counted and reported accurately. And that's what we have to do and make sure that there's no, not even a shred of a thought to where a person might think, well, that count's not valid. It's not a valid count. And we have done everything we possibly can to make sure that we've cleared that up. This is not everything that people on both sides of that wanted. Some in our bipartisan committee wanted a lot more, and some didn't want to basically interfere with the states' rights. So we were caught in betwixt and between. We worked back and forth in different things we could. We tried to put the guardrails on that gave guidance. And we think that we came up with a piece of legislation. And when you have every member I just mentioned all sign on and the diversity of these memberships, we have almost 20 senators that have been involved, coming equally between Democrats and Republicans, and able to come to an agreement. This is a piece of bill that we should put forward. I was proud to be an original sponsor of both the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And I still believe that we can and we must continue working to protect every American's sacred right to vote. But we also have an obligation to the American people to do the most good that we can right now. Right now. The confusing and antiquated language that we have on the books today from the 1887 Electoral Count Act is a real and present danger to our democracy. We can fix that, and that's exactly what we intend to do. The increased threats and attacks we're seeing across the country on poll workers and election volunteers, we can fix that too. But even more important than the policy provisions contained in these two bills is the fact that we have Democrats and Republicans standing arm in arm, proposing common sense election reforms that can begin to restore Americans' faith in our democracy. That's our solemn commitment and promise. When Benjamin Franklin was asked whether the Constitutional Convention had given us a republic or a monarchy, he famously replied, "A republic, young man, if you can keep it." He qualified his answer because he understood that democracy is fragile and can be lost if we are not careful. And while today's introduction is an important step in this process, we do have much work yet to do. I look forward to continuing our bipartisan effort to get this bill to the President's desk as quickly as possible and signed into law. And our journey begins. And with that, I would like to yield to my dear friend from the great state of Maine, Senator Susan Collins.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maine.
Mr. President,